Hi, I'm Jennifer Sir, owner of the Sewing Room. Welcome to our series in Business of Fashion. Today we're speaking with Stephanie Bodnar of Evgenia Lingerie. Very excited to speak with her today. Stephanie Bodnar graduated from Carnegie Mellon University in 2004 with a BA in creative writing and a freshly stoked interest in fashion. After moving to California, she worked in a lace shop and lingerie boutique while studying fashion design at FIDM. She was a designer in residence at San Francisco's prestigious Fashion Incubator program at Macy's Union Square for 2014 and 2015, and now operates her studio in the wilds of West Marin. The name Evgenia comes from Stephanie's paternal grandmother, Eugenia Mytska Bodnar, who emigrated from the Ukraine in the 1940s and worked as a seamstress in Port Jervis, New York. Evgenia lingerie can be found at select fine lingerie boutiques and is in the hands of lingerie connoisseurs the world over. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the Sewing Room.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you started
Sorry.
Evgenia?
Yes, so I started as honey cooler handmade on Etsy. So I had previously done a line right out of fashion school. So I should preface by saying I went to college for writing, and then my husband got into grad school at Cal. So I went to fashion school when we moved out here and started a line right out and had no idea what I was doing. So I ended up having to close that business and then decided to do what I should have done in the first place is work for other people. So I was working as like design assistant, like menial design jobs for several companies. And I was like always on the look for like the perfect silk camisole with like lace details. And every time I found like a vintage one, it was either shredded or too small or whatever. So I was like, I think I'm gonna try and like do some lace work myself. So I started my company as Honey Cooler Handmade, which was deco slang for a kiss was the name. And I just made like one of a kind pieces. So everything was like lightweight silk jacquards and vintage laces. And I did all these like insertion lace motifs, which is how I started the brand. And I only did one of everything. So I would do like, a small cami in red with like a bow and then a large one with a like swan or something, just like tons of different stuff to test the waters. And I started that brand on Etsy. And I did that for like a year or two. And then while I was working, and then I saw the Fashion Incubator of San Francisco was looking for new designers, and I applied and was rejected the first time because I was only doing one of a kind. I had no plans to like expand. Um, and then I decided to make reproducible collections using the same techniques but with modern fabrics, things I could get again. So I did a collection that was like camis, knickers, garter belts, just like a basic, pretty small collection. And then I actually got in the next year to the incubator. So while I was there, I rebranded as Evgenia to kind of take away from like the kind of more precious, like hobby esque vibe of my previous brand, which I still love and hold dear to my heart, but it didn't really align with the like luxury brand that I was looking for. So that's how I started the brand. And I started on Etsy in 2011. So it's been like a long time, like
Yeah.
a while, but it started out very slow. So, just like there were weeks that I'd make like one piece or something. And now I'm, churning them out like crazy. So
Yeah. So are you still on Etsy or do you sell mostly direct through your website?
I'm still on Etsy. Etsy, of course, has its pitfalls. Like their cut is very high. Like they take a big percentage of sales, but they bring in a lot of organic traffic. And while I mostly sell smaller pieces on there, I've sold my most expensive pieces there too. It's just a lot more intermittent. Like there's honestly months that will go by where I'll get nothing and then it'll be more steady. So it's kind of a good way to get seen in front of people. Because sometimes, I mean, it's hard to make your own traffic on your own website doing SEO, and Etsy kind of does that for you. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So you've been making lingerie now for how long?
I started Honey Cooler Handmade in 2011. So that's really like when I started really experimenting with it. I've always been into corsetry. So I started my first like sewing project actually was a corset when I was in college. And obviously that was not very good, but it was like how I started. So I don't, I wasn't into sewing silks and stuff until later because I didn't realize, I think, how hard that would be. It's like a very skilled sewing ability to have. It takes a long time to get to be able to do that. But yeah, I started sewing with silks like in earnest in about 2011.
And then the corsets you have on your site, those are really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
they're the ribbon corset. So it's like it's drafted off of the Edwardian ribbon corset that women would wear either to bed or to play sports to keep their shape. Because you've seen the ones that are like the full
right.
corsets. It's like a little more delicate. And it's redrafted for a modern body, so it's not going to be like a super cinch or anything.
Wow, it's really beautiful. Do you have your product manufactured or are you still the maker of everything?
I'm the maker of everything.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's what sets my brand apart. Like when people reach out to, I mean, I have people buy directly off the site, obviously all the time, but I'm pretty active on socials and people can reach out to me directly and say, I have this fit concern, or, I love this bed jacket, but I need it to be just like a little longer. Or, like my one bicep is bigger than the other one. That way they can like talk to me directly and I can, make stuff directly for them. So, and honestly, I looked at manufacturing several times over the years and there are a number of barriers, not the least of which is that like this type of sewing is just really not done very much in the US. Like to go get really well made lingerie, you really need to look at like Romania or Poland. And I just don't have like the time resources or the money resources to like go and make that happen. So yeah, I don't know. It's something I've thought about doing, but now especially as my brand has grown, I feel like people come to me because I make the stuff. Like it feels more special.
Absolutely. Do you try to have some sort of stock in hand?
Yes. Yeah. So I try to keep one or two of every style and size and color available. So when things slow down, like if I have a week where I like have like a couple orders or one order, um, I just come in here and refill. Like I just did a big promo for Black Friday and sold through a bunch of stuff. So once things slow down post holidays and right before Valentine's, I can go back in and restock those things. And there are a few things that I do made to order that are usually the bigger ticket items. Like there's a robe that I have that's extremely expensive that I never thought anyone would buy. And I did sell a bunch of those during the pandemic, but I never keep stock in them just because it is like you have to hit the right person for something like that. So there's a few exceptions to keeping things in stock, but generally, like if a piece is more than $500, I'm not gonna keep it in stock.
So is now let me see if I'm pronouncing it right. Is it Evgenia?
Yep, that's right. You're one of the few people that gets it right.
Is it your full-time occupation or yeah, and at what point in your career or business did you decide to devote all your time to work on it?
So yeah, this is my job basically. I I started when I did the incubator, the fashion incubator. That's when I really like buckled down. So it was it felt like at that point in my business, the incubator at the time kind of required a good amount of your resources and time, and it really is what you put into it. So I had to kind of just put everything else aside and buckle down for a year. And I looked at it as like, if I can't make this happen this year, then it's not going to happen. And since I've been in the incubator, I've been making money every year. I mean, it's like, I'm not making a ton of money, but I have not been in the red for a few years now. So this is a full-time thing as much as my being a mom limits. Like I my daughter's in kindergarten, so her days are half days. Um, so on a very good day, I might get 4 hours in the shop. That's a very good day. So it's really honestly probably like it's like a part-time job on top of being a
Full-time
mom.
mom. Yeah.
Yeah. So Yeah, yeah, it works out well in that I have, I have the flexibility. My studio is on my property, so it's not like I have to commute anywhere or anything. But yeah, it's what I do basically all the time when I'm not being a mom, which is all the time.
All the time. Yeah. I'm a mom too, so I totally understand. But my daughter's 19, so a
Yeah,
little more self-contained at this point.
yeah.
Um, what kind of help did you seek out besides the incubator? And I want to come back to the incubator, but what kind of help did you seek out when you started your business?
Well, when I started, I mentioned it was on Etsy, so it was like I was doing one of kind stuff. It was very inexpensive because I went to like Discount Fabrics in SF, dug through the silk, found like a yard and a half of something, had some lace in my stash, and it was really a minimal cost in the beginning. So I really I really didn't seek out a ton of help in the beginning. And honestly, I feel like the help really did come from the incubator. As my business has grown and been able to pay for itself, like that's when things have started to roll. But yeah, I don't think in the beginning I really had a ton of help. It was more of just, I came into it being somebody that was not a great self starter, and I had to really kind of get myself going. And actually I had a women's group that I met with like every like other Sunday that was like all women business owners, and we all kind of just like cheered each other on. I think that was probably the biggest thing at that point. But I didn't really seek out much help. Also because I think I wasn't looking at doing this as like a traditional business where you're going to go into production, and I just kind of wanted it to be small. And I still have people all the time being like, you should do XYZ. And I'm like, I'm actually really happy where I am. So I don't know. The incubator was the big thing. And that really helped me create a brand that I think from the outside, I keep hearing that it looks bigger than it is. Like people see the website and they think it's a big brand or a
Absolutely.
much more established luxe brand, and they don't realize it's like one person. So I mean, I think that was the goal.
So tell us a little bit about the incubator and how that, what that looked like. When
Yeah. So at the time, it's now moved. It used to be in the old men's Macy's building, which is now gone in San Francisco. Now it's housed in the Bloomingdale's building. But so basically, you would pay like a small fee. It's like basically rent for like an office space and a ton of workspace. And the workroom had like industrial sewing machines, a giant cutting table, industrial irons, like all of that stuff. And you would also have mentorship. So we had somebody that was great with branding, and he's the one that helped me with my rebrand. Um, there was Gene Allen and Mark Grant ran the program. They're not running it anymore. I think they're still on the board, but um, they had a very successful clothing company in the 90s, Gene Mark, which was like a huge deal. And they came in with tons of knowledge. We also had Dorothy Yuki, who has worked with them, and she's like great with the nitty gritty of sewing and pattern making and was able to help us with that. So you could come in with really very little fashion knowledge, but a good idea, and that would kind of help you pull it together. So yeah, I was there for actually over a year. I think it was a year and a half. And then my husband and I moved out of the city, so I didn't stay in the program after that, just because it didn't make like sense to be going back and forth. But yeah, it was a designer in residence program basically, and yeah, it was really great. I think very much of what you put into it. So you had to like really commit to like being there every day, and it's really up to you what you do with it. But I ended up being able to show a gown at New York Fashion Week,
Wow.
and I had some great opportunities. But that's all just because you like really hustle and make it happen. So yeah, it was a great program. I'm sure the structure has changed somewhat just because there's been like a lot of changing with like who's running it and everything, but I'm still in contact with the program, and it was really great for me.
That's awesome. Um, so you have a very curated collection of styles.
Yeah.
How did you determine which styles you would offer?
Well, I started, as I mentioned, with the like small collection of like camis and knickers and stuff. So I started my first collection as Evgenia was still the camis, corsets, I added a tap short. I was just trying to see like I went through all my sales and saw like what was moving and what wasn't moving. So the camis were really big, the corsets were really big, and knickers sort of not so much, but like they're always a good pair to have, and sometimes that comes in waves. So every season I just kind of look at every season. I do new collections like once every year or two at this point, honestly. So I don't do seasons anymore, but I just kind of look and see what's been going well, what people have been responding to. Um, I always add a corset to a collection because people love those. This last collection was a revamp of an old version, so I added like it's the velvet green and red velvet, a long sleeve bed jacket where I had just a short sleeve before. There's a luxe corset where there was only a regular one. The luxe has garters, like just kind of adding on what people seem to buy. And as much as I like to take like liberties and go kind of bonkers with my designs, I try to make things that people will respond to, like the Marguerite collection, which is the cotton one, that's like the Edwardian blouse style. That was kind of risky for me. I hadn't done a cotton collection before as this brand, and actually the bed jackets have been doing really well considering they have a pretty high price point. I was worried they wouldn't move, but they've been doing really well. So I'm starting to think about my next range, and I might kind of do some kind of adaptation of that in a different fabrication. So yeah, I think when you're in fashion school, everybody's like, you got to come up with something new all the time. But honestly, I feel like I don't really come up with super new stuff a lot. Like it's more kind of reworking what's already there.
And I think that's a really good strategy actually, because
Yeah,
you're building on stuff that you already know that sells.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so you do make custom and made to order pieces. Do you do things that are sort of only the pieces that you show on your website, or are some people come to you for like super custom stuff that's a little off the board?
Well, I try to keep it somewhat corralled. Just as far as custom goes, I can't do full custom because I don't have access to like a fabric store and like to go and do this the way that I used to be able to. And frankly, the cost of like my hourly to like deal with all that, it really doesn't compute to something that feels reasonable to most people. So if I can keep it within my offerings, as in like I actually just made that Starlit Teddy, which is that black little,
Love that one.
so fun. I had somebody reach out wanting it in the Marguerite fabric like a month ago. So I actually made it in the Marguerite fabric, the cotton, and we did lace ruffles instead. So something like that where I can adapt an existing pattern. She wanted like a ruched rear, so I had to change the pattern a little bit, but it wasn't an exceptionally difficult thing. The other thing too is because I'm so far out, I don't really get the opportunity to meet with people in person. And for true custom, I feel like you got to meet with people in person. I have to be able to fit their bodies. Um, like I had a woman buy one of my gowns, and it's a cowl draped bust. So it works on a lot of bust sizes, but if your bust is positioned like really high or really low, like you really need to have that fitted in person. I can go off measurements, but it's not going to tell me the whole story. So I stray from like true custom just because it's like it costs a lot, and oftentimes I can't like tweak it, you know? So if it's a long story short, if I have the patterns and I have the fabric already, that's like we can do pretty much anything. Yeah.
That's great. Um, so you're a mom and your daughter's in kindergarten, right?
This is 5, yes.
So how does that impact the way you do business, and or and like how does having a business impact your family life?
um, well, my husband and I both work from home, but he's got like a pretty intense job, so I'm definitely the default parent, and my job is much more flexible. Like if she's sick and I'm not bogged down with orders, I can take care of it. I generally like I'll pick her up from school, bring her in the shop. She has like her perler beads and her drawing that she can do. Um, so she's like a pretty good little like sidekick sometimes. I mean, other times she's like, I want to rip the shop apart and like make my own thing. So I definitely have lost a lot of time to work on this. the way that I would like to. And it's just like, it is a function of just being a mother to a small child. Like she needs a lot of attention um, and I have to shuttle her around to stuff. So there's just like no way to get all the time in that I would love, but it's just like, it's a give and take. And I know that's going to change. And I honestly feel like the business helps me as a parent because I get my creative outlet. Like part of why I sew everything is I love sewing. Like I love making things. Like I love having my hands on fabric. So if I get those hours in during the day, it's a business and it feeds me as well. It feeds my soul. So and it sounds kind of hokey, but it's like it does do that. So I think it as long as I get those creative outlets, like I feel like I'm a better mother because of that.
That's wonderful. I feel like that too, actually. When I have time to create, I'm definitely a better partner and mother and all of
Yeah.
these. Yeah.
You're a person. Like if you're a creative person, you need that. So yeah.
Um, do you have any insights for designers just starting out?
Yes. um, work for someone else. It's like the one thing that I was so stubborn when I left fashion school. I'd already had a degree. I was like 24, 20. I was like, I know everything. I'm going to do this right out the gate. Most fashion schools don't teach you anything about business. They just teach you how to design. I get people emailing me like once a week being like, I want to design for you. And I'm like, I don't design new stuff often. And when I do, that is my happy place. Like that is what I've worked for, you know? Like you don't get to do the fun stuff right out the gate. You have to go work for someone, do the stuff you don't like. I mean, I was working for a big brand in SF, recolorizing the same technical flat hundreds of times. It was achingly boring, but it is part of it. You need to know like how that works, and it gives you a perspective of like what a business is like behind the scenes. I also worked for a woman who ran a women's wear line in SF that had sold to like Nordstrom and everything, and the design business was literally out of her house. And I got to see the behind the scenes of like how she interacted with factories and interfaced with her designers and stuff. And I think that's important. Like at the very least, an internship, but more than that, I honestly feel like a few years of hands-on experience with a designer, with a brand in SF or wherever you are, you know, like is important.
Yeah, there's so many moving parts. You have to sort of see how that kind of comes together.
Totally. And I didn't have a concept of it. I mean, I went in as a designer when I did the even the Etsy stuff, like my bookkeeping was horrible. Like I had to keep a spreadsheet, and then I finally got like a separate credit card for my brand a few years ago. Like I didn't think about it. So all those little bits you need to see someone else go through before you make the mistakes, you know? And I feel so strongly about that. I used to go to FIDM and like talk to students that were incoming, and I'd be like, work for someone else. Don't start a brand out the gate. You need to know what you're doing, and you could be a great designer, but it doesn't matter. Like you need to know how to run a business.
Yeah, and likewise, you don't have to have your own brand either. You can go work for someone else, right?
I mean, as someone who is a control freak and a very creative person, I get it. Like, I love having my own created thing. But yeah, it's expensive. If you're starting from nothing, it's expensive. I mean, it took me years to get to this, just eking along. But if you're going to start in the beginning, you need a ton of capital just from the beginning. Like, it's wild. And I think people go broke because they just don't know what they're doing, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Are you part of a mastermind, or do you do any business groups like you were talking about before?
No, I haven't in a while. I would love to, but there's really nothing out where I am, and it's hard to find the time, you know?
Yeah. Well, what's the best way for people to find your products?
Well, I'm really active on socials. I'm on Instagram. I joined TikTok a few months ago, so it's just my brand name, Evgenia Lingerie. I'm still on Twitter, but it looks like that's crashing and burning, so I don't know what's happening with Twitter right now. Um, I'm really easy to reach through those platforms, and my website is just I am evgenia.com, and I'm also on Etsy too, so you can find me through those things and email or whatever.
And I'll put everything in the show notes so people know how to get a hold of you and to see your wonderful, beautiful product.
So thanks.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
What a great conversation with Stephanie. Just to recap a little bit about what we talked about in the interview, um, and Stephanie's process. She first went to design school, which is great. Like, you got to go to design school. You got to learn design in some manner, shape, or form. Then she worked with other designers, and that was one of her biggest tips: is work for someone else first. It's one of my biggest tips too. When you work for other people, you understand what all the working parts are, and there's a lot of them in the fashion industry. Then she started small when she had her own collection, and she had a little Etsy shop where she made only one of a kind items. That was a great way for her to test her product and for her to move forward with her next level design. When she was ready to grow, she sought out help through the SF Incubator. I'll link them down below. And she got help with branding and how to apply her vintage style to pieces that she can reproduce. From there, she decided to make all the pieces herself. And this is really a big one because it's not for everybody, because not everybody loves to sew, but that's one of the parts of the business that she really loves. And so it also sets her apart from other lingerie businesses. People really come to her because they know she's the one making the garment. And that's a really important part and an important thing to think about in our culture um, and our society and in the whole world of sustainable fashion. Like, you want to know who's actually making your garment. And if you can actually know them a little bit, I think that's pretty fabulous. So if you like this interview, please give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe. It really helps us out. And if you're interested in our fashion studies program, please visit our website at thesewingroom-alameda.com/fashion-studies. We actually have a class coming up on how to run your own Etsy shop, and I'm very excited for you to find out more about it. So without further ado, have a great day and happy fashion.